This episode is brought to you by Dave, a banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. Because when you download Dave, you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's Extra Cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Download Dave today at dave.com/Spotify. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Hello, and you are listening to another episode of the Flatliner Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. Hope you guys enjoyed the last one where Chris went into behavior, obedience, e-collar. We're going to really start ramping those up where we're going through the FlowChart, and I love those episodes. And honestly, when I was training Georgie, I went through Chris's audio version of those two things, and I found it even better than videos, honestly, when I went through it. So what'd you think of that, Chris? You think that episode turned out pretty good?
Yeah, I think it was all right. Hi, guys. Chris Jobman here. Hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, I think it turned out good. It's really hard to kind of explain, obedience, collar conditioning, force fetch, and a lot of this stuff over the air, but try to do it as best as we can, and hopefully it makes sense to everybody. But it's really good to see it in person, because a lot of this stuff, a lot of the force work and that kind of stuff is a feel. They do something, then you react. It's a touchy-feely toward a deal, and all the timing is everything. But we try to do our best to get it on the air here and explain it to the best of my ability without actually being there.
Right. And just remember, guys, if you have follow-up questions, go over to the Facebook group, Flatliner Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman Facebook group, and put the questions over there. Every time there's a question, I take it off, I put it on a Word document, and we hold them. So don't hesitate to make this interactive, and we can get some follow-up questions. So
absolutely.
So what do we got tonight, Chris?
All right, so let's do this. And I'm going to try not to talk forever about this, because this is literally, you could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. But this is the third step of our flow chart, and we're going to talk about force fetch. And, our first two steps are obedience, on-leash obedience, and then we're still on the lead, and we're doing collar conditioning. And during those times, we're still throwing marks for the pup, and we're still throwing birds and do all those sort of things. Now we're going to get into the force fetch part of it. And I know a lot of people out there, they'll do obedience, force fetch, then collar conditioning. And I used to do that years ago, and for some reason in my head, it makes better sense to me to do obedience, collar conditioning, than force fetch, because at the end of force fetch, you have collar fetch. And if you don't do it collar conditioning before force fetch, if you do force fetch first, then you've got to kind of collar condition and then go back to collar fetch. So to me, it's more of a natural flow, and I think you have a little bit more control on the dog when you have him on the bench or the ground or wherever you decide to put him on. And I think once they've been through obedience and collar condition, I think you've got a better control of the dog, for one, and for two, it just flows really naturally right from, your collar conditioning's already done, the tail end of force fetch is collar fetch, and you just kind of flow right into it. So it's there's no other, there's no two ways about it. You can do it however you want to do it. And if it works for you, that's great. But in my mind, to me, this is an easier flow. So, so we've been through obedience, we've been through collar conditioning, and the thing about force fetch is a lot of people are scared of it, don't understand it, and that sort of thing. And if you are one of those people, by all means, seek out a good professional trainer that, can do your, basics for you. And what I mean by that is the collar conditioning, force fetch part of it. And then you guys take it over from there. But there's no reason to really be scared of it. There's a lot of people that do it lots of different ways. I'm just going to kind of talk about the ways that we do it here and how I like to do it. It's one of the most, force fetch is one of the most misunderstood things, I think, when it comes to training. You look on a lot of the Facebook pages and the forums and yada, 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 and somebody will say, hey, my dog's not running good blinds retrieves, go back to force fetch. I mean, everybody, for some reason, that is everybody's get out card is go back to force fetch, when most people don't even know really, the ins and outs of it. But the force fetch does a couple different things. One, it's very obvious. It gets rid of mouthing problems in dogs, makes them hold it really nice, makes them deliver it to heel, delivered to hand, and that's what a lot of people think it does. And so they don't drop the bird, and if they do, they pick it right back up and deliver it. And it does do that, don't get me wrong. But a major, major, major part of force fetch is if you're following a force program, whether you're following Mike Lardy's, whether you're following any of the Rex Carr stuff, or any of the modern force programs that involve force to pile and water force and D-cheat, and a lot of those force programs, which most trainers nowadays do some version of that. If you don't force fetch your dog and collar fetch your dog, you really can't force to pile because they don't understand it. You can't water force because they don't understand it. And when you do that, if you don't do that, then you don't have a tool to, if they no-go you don't have a tool to fix that. I mean, there's a lot of things that force fetch is involved in, and holding the bird nicely is just one of them. And what it also does is for a dog is so through obedience, through collar conditioning, we're trying to teach the dog how to shut off pressure, how to work with you, perform the task, shut off pressure, handle it stably, mentally. And force fetch is another extension of that, because eventually throughout this dog's career, it's going to have to handle some mental stress and get a little bit weird on you. And this is going to help them understand how to shut off the pressure to do the task, right? So when you force fetch Georgie, Elliot, were you really nervous to do it? Did it go pretty smooth for you? How did that work for you? Because I know a lot of amateurs are very, very scared of it. And a lot of them don't do it thorough enough, probably, and correctly. And I see a lot of, mouthing issues when we go to hunt tests, and even on hunting, I see a lot of mouthing issues on some of them dogs.
Yeah, I wasn't nervous about it. I had done it once before, not really with yours. It was similar to your system. And I didn't quite do it properly, but I wasn't nervous at all. It took a couple months to go through, and you were kind of there with me, just say, hey, whatever time it takes is the time it takes. Just relax. And finally, the only problem I ran into at the very end is I couldn't get her to stop kind of chewing the bird a little bit.
Yeah.
But other than that, I thought, it did take a long time, a couple months, but it went smoothly, and it seemed to take because she seems good now, so.
Good. Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there. I always get the question, how long does it take to force fetch? When I say force fetch, I'm talking my force fetch. I'm talking the time we start hold to the time we are like in collar fetch, a little bit of a force of pile deal. That to me is all force fetch. Move to the field, that's all force fetch. So to me, I don't ever put a time frame on it because every dog's different, right? So. Some of the British dogs take a little bit longer. They're a little bit more sensitive, and maybe the Goldens and that sort of thing. And if it takes you a month, it takes you a month. It takes you a month and a half, it takes you a month and a half. It doesn't really matter how long it takes you. It just matters how good and thorough it is when you're done. But I will tell you this about force fetch: you want to try to get in and get out as quickly and positively as you can. Because I don't care what anybody says. Oh, is that positive training? That's all? No, it's not. It's called force fetch for a reason. Force fetch. So there is some force involved in there. But like I said, we're trying to teach that dog how to deal with that and cope with it, with a stable response. So what we do now is, before you can move into force fetch, your obedience has to be pretty solid. Our obedience is pretty solid before we move in. Because I know there's a lot of guys out there that just throw them up on the table and they chain them in and go that way. And we do that as well, but we like our obedience a little bit more solid, because what we like to do is once they're through obedience collar conditioning, then we start teaching them to hold. And I know there's a lot of things out there that, people use wooden dowels and wooden bucks and hammers and rocks and bricks and all kinds of stuff to make a dog hold during force fetch. Well, I can tell you right now, I've never ran a mark where they threw a hammer. So I don't really care about holding a hammer or a brick or a rock or a shovel, or people do some crazy things. I don't care. I like to start, if we're starting out with a real young dog, I think a paint roller is really, really good. I like a 3-inch bumper or a 2-inch bumper, to be quite honest with you. We've done a little bit about everything here. We've done wooden dowels and dumbbells and all those things. And Avery actually makes a really cool little bumper. It's kind of raised off the floor. It's perfect for force fetch.
Looks like a dumbbell.
Looks like a dumbbell.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool little bumper. It's perfect for force fetch, to be quite honest with you. We use that as well. But what we like to do is we start with whatever you decide to use, whether it's a paint roller or one of those Avery bumpers or whatever you decide to use. You put it in their mouth. And what I like to do is I like to, I put my hand, so I'm just going to say everybody's heel on the left. I know if you heel on the right, exact opposite of what I'm going to say as far as hands and sides. But I'm going to say everything is on the left. So if they're on the left-hand side, now I still have the leash on them. I still have a long lead on them, and I've moved to a flat collar. Okay, I've moved to a flat collar with a buckle. And what I do with my dogs, I just take my left hand over the top of their muzzle, and I pinch their cheek, I guess their lip on their canine, and I just pinch it on that canine, and when they open it up, I say fetch, and I just put the dowel in their mouth, right? So they really can't see it because my hand's kind of covering it, but I'm trying to associate a little bit of discomfort with putting that in their mouth. As soon as they get in their mouth, let off on the lip. So I'm just trying to let them associate, hey, open your mouth. This is kind of painful. Open your mouth, put the bumper in, then it goes away. Instead of just going to the ear right away and trying to squeeze it as hard as you can, a lot of these dogs are super tough, and it's really hard for them to open their mouth if you do that. But we like to put the lip on their canine, and you just squeeze. And no matter how tough a dog that you think you have, if you put the lip on their canine, they will open their mouth. I will guarantee it.
So are you putting it on the point of their canine, or just on the side of it? So you're just so you're pushing it up into their canine. Okay.
Correct. You just reach over the top of it. Your left hand right over the top of their muzzle, and you just take that lip and you press it on their canine, with your your middle finger and your pointy finger and your index finger, and they will open their mouth. And then when they do that, you just say fetch, and then once they have it in their mouth, we'll say hold. And you're going to fight this a little bit, guys. They're going to try to spit it out. They're going to move their head. This is why and when we start this, you can do it one of two ways. You can either be on a table, or you can be on the ground. However you want to do it, or you can do it on a tailgate of a pickup for that matter. Whatever you want to do, I will tell you, if you're going to go right to the ground without a table, your dog's obedience has got to be pretty good. It's got to sit there really nice, not try to fight you, not try to get away, because then you're working on obedience and force fetch. It's just a disaster, okay? So I did it for years and years and years, my entire career on the ground. I just went right to the floor of my shop. I didn't use a table or anything like that, because I did try a table when I was younger, and there was always a huge transition from the table to the ground. The second you took them off the table, they would drop it. They basically, you had to reteach them how to do everything, because for some reason that didn't transfer very well. So I just got rid of the table and I just went right to the ground. Right now, I know Julie, she force fetches for us, and she uses a table. And if I had to force fetch right now, I would probably use a table just to save my back. But when I was younger and dumber, I just used the floor and just went for it. And it can be a little bit rough on your back, but it does save a few steps, I think, when it comes.
How about like a real short stool?
No, because they have to be either on the ground. I mean, you could sit on a stool.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Short
Yeah,
stool. Yeah,
yeah.
you could sit on and like those. You see those mechanics have them rolling stools that are real low. Those are great, actually.
Right.
You could sit on one of them little rolling stools and save your back a ton. But so we're on the ground. Let's just say that we're on a table, however you want to do it, and you open their mouth up. You put the bumper or whatever you're using in their mouth, and then make them hold it. And then I like to walk around them. I like to walk all the way around them. That's why your obedience has got to be really good if you're going to do the floor. I like to walk all the way around them, make sure they hold it. Now, if they drop it, you just walk over, you say no, 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 and you open their mouth up again, fetch, hold it, hold.
So when you first start it, let's say you're on day 1, how long of a hold are you looking for? Like a second, 2 seconds?
Very seldom on day 1, 2, 3, you will be able to walk all the way around them.
Right.
You're hoping to maybe they just get a good, stable hold, and they just don't fight you, and you can maybe walk a few feet away and then walk back to them.
Do you want to take it from them before they release it, or because obviously at that stage they're going to be spitting it out at some point?
Yeah.
at their
So
very early
yeah,
phases.
I use the command give. So if you put it in their mouth and they're holding it good, and let's say I walk 5 feet away, I stand there for 2 seconds, I walk back to them again, I maybe pet them on the back with my left hand, and then I go reach for it and I'll say give, and then I just take it out of their mouth. Now I let them drop it. I let them release it. Don't yank it out of their mouth, because then they start grabbing onto it harder. So when you say give, you want that dog to kind of back away from the bumper.
See, this was the hardest phase for Georgie. We went weeks where there was no way I was going to walk away from her at all. I couldn't. This was by far the hardest phase, where she just wanted to repetitively just spit it out, spit it out, spit it out. So if I got her to do 2 seconds, after day 7, if I got her to do 2 seconds, I was feeling great.
I'm telling you, there's some dogs that will just fight you on this. It is unbelievable. The dogs will you put it in their mouth and then just spit it out. And you never think you're going to make any headway, and you just have to be. This is going to test your patience as a dog trainer. This is phase 1 of patience training, because this will test your patience, especially
Right.
some of them dogs that just fight you on this deal. And you just got to be calm. And I'll tell you, and I'll tell people, I don't like to do long force fetch sessions. Anything past 15 minutes is plenty. Up to 15 minutes is a good time. Anything past 15 minutes, to me, that's getting to be too much, because they lose interest and you start mentally just draining them. So if you could do, 2 to 3 10-minute sessions a day, that's perfect. If you can do 2 15-minute sessions a day, that's perfect. But don't try to stuff it. Hey, I missed yesterday. Let's do 45 minutes today. That's just not going to work. Okay. So let's just say we're on the ground. Now the bumper's in their mouth. You can walk around them. You can come back up to them. I like to kind of tap on the bumper with my fingers too, and they're holding it. Tap on it, and I don't want them to spit it out or drop it. I would like for them to hold on to it, not clamp down on it, but kind of firm. And not drop it, right? You just kind of tap on it. When you do that, you can say hold, and you can just tap on the bumper, and then walk away and come back. So now they're doing that well, and it may take you. This may be days into this thing. This may be days. And now here's the next big step. Now we're going to make them heel with this. And I will bet you about everything in my wallet right now that was the second you make them move forward, they're spitting it out. That's the nature of the beast. They're just going to spit it out, and then you got to go, no, hold it, and you put it back in their mouth. And what I like to do here is I like to grab like the back of the flat collar. I like to grab. Now you're going to loosen up your flat collar so that you can get your 4 fingers in it and without choking them, right? But I like to put my hands in the flat collar and just kind of lead them with me. I'll say heel, and I'll just kind of pull them along, and we'll only go maybe a foot. And I'll say sit, hold it, good, hold it. And then when I do that, I put my right hand underneath their jaw. There's underneath the jaw they have that V, and I like to put my hand, hold it, good. And then grab their collar, maybe go 2 or 3 feet, make them sit, hold. And if they drop it, no big deal, make them sit, pick up the bumper, pinch their mouth, and then put it right back in, right? We're still not on an ear pinch yet. But then put it in their mouth. And then when you want to keep doing this till you can get to the point, Now we're on the ground, okay, guys? You want to get to the point where you can do most of your obedience sessions with them holding the bumper. Like, you can walk the figure eights like we talked about in the last episode, make them sit, do your here, do your heel, do a sit stay, walk around them, have somebody come in, walk through the kennel, walk back out, and you don't want them dropping that. You want them really good hold at this point, okay? This is going to take you a while to get there. Now, if you're a person that does it on the table, you're going to make them hold, but then you should have a cable system like we do on our table that you can make them dogs walk back and forth across the table from one end to the other, sit, walk around, walk back, and then without dropping it. So that's how you would do it on the table. And then and do it on the ground. That's where you make them heel with you. That's why your obedience, if you're going to do it on the ground, that's why your obedience and collar conditioning is going to be really good, because you're going to expect them to be walking at heel nicely, because you can't work on a crappy heel and a crappy hold. That's just not going to work. So they got to be really good with obedience. So once you can do that, then I start the
Can I ask you a couple questions before we move on to the next thing? So you start with the finger and their canine and their lip. At what point do you take that away and you're not doing that anymore?
I was almost there.
Okay, so you're still, every time that you give them the bird at this point, even when you're walking them figure eights, you're doing the canine lip thing every single time.
Lip pinch, and then I'm putting, I'm saying fetch. I'm pinching their lip and I'm putting it in their mouth.
Even if they're lunging and grabbing it, you're still doing it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so under no circumstance do you stop that portion of it.
You can, if you want to go to the ear pinch right away. That's your prerogative. I like the lip pinch during this phase of it. I like the lip pinch. I think you have more control a little bit. They don't fight you as much, and I think it's a really black and white thing for them. Hey, I pinch your lip, it hurts. Right. Open your mouth.
But for the guy that says, "Hey, he's grabbing it," I'm not going to do the linchpin, any pressure anymore, because they're grabbing it. You've got to continue to keep that pressure.
You
during
have
the whole
to.
process.
Yes, correct. Just because there's a difference between a dog wanting to grab that bumper, and there's a difference between a dog wanting to grab it and a different dog that you have to grab it no matter what.
Right.
And we'll get to that a little bit farther into the process, because you have to get to that point where they have to. It's like an impulse for them.
Okay. My other question is, as far as your tone of voice and demeanor during this process, is it ever okay to be stern, or is it always calm? Like
pretty calm.
Fetch. Is it?
No, it's
keep
pretty
it out.
Calm. It's. Here's the thing: if you start getting amped up and screaming and yelling and getting excited and getting overly emotional, that dog's going to read that, and it's already in a stressful situation. You've just made it 10 times worse.
Can you show us kind of what your tone would be, how you would say it?
Yeah, it'd be like it would seriously be like, fetch, good, attaboy, good, fetch, no, no, hold it.
And if he doesn't do it, you don't ramp it up. You're staying in that level the whole time.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if he continually drops it, you may want to be a little bit. You may go no, hold it.
Gotcha.
But you maybe enunciate the no a little bit more, but you go back to being calm, because if you start getting overly emotional, it's going to end up really bad, because then all of a sudden they're even more stressed, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But when they do well, there's nothing wrong with attaboy, good, attaboy. Mm-hmm. Now when you do that, they may get all giggly and wiggly and spit it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then no, hold it. Good. Attaboy. Good. And then, just like that, you try to stay even keel as possible.
Gotcha.
And calm.
Okay.
So now that if you're on the table, that dog's walking back and forth and it's holding it really nice. If you're on the ground, the dog's doing figure eights and sitting and holding it really nice. And when you get to this point, most of the time when you do the lip pinch, they're reaching for it. And you hope to see them reaching for it, because then if they're reaching for it at that point, you know that you're getting your point across. Okay, you know you're getting your point across. Now at this point is I personally, if it's me, I personally like to use a 3-inch Avery Hexa bumper, a white one. This is why I like, and I'm going to get to why I like to do it here in a little bit. I like the 3-inch bumper the best myself. It's a little bit bigger, but I think they hold on to it pretty easily and stuff like that. And I'm about to tell you why. So when we're on the ground and we're moving forward, so now you have your hand under their flat collar, right? And you have that buckle on your collar. You have that little finger, whatever you want to call it, that sticks through the hole in the collar on the buckle. And I just take their left ear, I fold it over, and I use my thumb, my left hand is under their collar, and I use that ear flap, their left ear, on the outside portion, so you're just flapping it over, and I will push their ear against that little prong on the flat collar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the prong that allows you to adjust the
yes, and that's where that's
size.
the pressure. I know some people use their fingernails, some people use shotgun shells. I've heard people using tacks. I've heard people using whatever. I like to just use their ear and that little the prong of the collar. It's already right there. If you want to, you can bend that up just a tiny little bit to make it a little bit sharper, but don't get too crazy. You don't want to poke through the ear. So now you flap that ear over. You have that under. You pinch their ear, push their ear against that prong, and you say fetch. Hopefully at this point they've understood. Okay, that hurts. Open my mouth. Pick the bumper up. I'll bet you it goes pretty smooth for you at this point because you've kind of conditioned them to open their mouth with the command fetch by using the lip pinch. Now you're just moving the pressure point to someplace different. They already kind of know the concept of opening their mouth because a lot of people start just right away start with the ear. There are some dogs, no matter how tough you think you are and how hard you can squeeze, I'm going to tell you, for some reason, they do not transfer that ear pinch to the ear, the pressure. They just don't transfer it. I don't know why. They just shut down and they just, they grit their teeth and take it. So I like to use a lip pinch to soften that up. And now we've got the ear pinch. So you pinch their ear, you say fetch, they reach for it, put it in their mouth, let off on the ear. Now don't let go of the collar. Keep a hold of the collar, just let off on the ear. Hold it, say, good, that a boy, good. Give, take it out of their mouth. They're sitting down, and you're either on a stool or you're bending over. You put their ear back over there, you pinch it, you say fetch, and maybe you hold it six inches away, and they reach for it. And you keep doing this until you're moving, have them reach about a foot away from the front of their face, so they're kind of hopefully moving for it just a little bit. And you can even start walking forward, say, fetch, and you can kind of pull them and keep constant pressure on that ear, and you can kind of pull them in kind of a horse and a carrot sort of thing. You can put it in front of their face, and they're trying to reach for it, and you just kind of keep moving the bumper farther away, and you kind of pull them towards the bumper with the pressure, and then when they're kind of like really reaching for it, then you stop the bumper and you let their momentum go into that bumper, when you say fetch, and then let off on their ear, say, yeah, boy. So that's what you're doing is you're teaching them to move towards that bumper and get their momentum going. Okay,
right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then, so now let's say you can do that. You can go out a few feet doing that. So now then I start working my way down to the ground. So now put them in a sit. So let's just say you held it right in front of their face to begin with. Now I start going lower to the ground. And I say fetch. And then a lot of times they may not reach for it because they may reach for it in front of them. But the second you start moving down, they won't reach. It's the weirdest thing. And some dogs take to it, some dogs don't. When that happens, you have to physically, maybe push their nose down so they're looking at it, fetch, and then just move it. And then you want to try to get to the ground as quickly as you can. Just kind of keep going to the ground. Hopefully they're reaching for it. And you want to get to the point at this stage where you can set it on the ground and they'll reach down and pick it up. Now, that's a huge step. So when you do that and they're lunging for it, and then they're moving it to the ground, and I guarantee you 99.9% of the dogs, you put it on the ground and you take your hand off of it and you pinch their ear and you say fetch, they're not going to fetch it up. They're like, why aren't you holding it? Mm-hmm. That's a humongous step for them. For some reason in their head, that's a huge hurdle. And so then what I like to do is I like to hold the very end of it where the rope part is. I hold the very end of it like I'm almost tricking them. Hey, I'm holding on to it, but I'm really not. And then I say fetch, and they'll grab it. Or then I'll move it maybe to the end of the rope, and I'll kind of hold the end of the rope, and I'll say fetch and push them down there, and they'll pick it up. And then my hand might be down there at this point now, not even touching the bumper, just my hand's down there, but they think I am, right? And then say fetch, push them down there, and they pick it up. Now I'll just pull my hand away. So I'm kind of I'm slowly tricking them where I'm not holding it, you know?
Right.
And the reason why I like to use a 3-inch bumper at this point and through this whole process is because that's why, like the dumbbells and stuff, that's why the middle part of it, the barrel part, is up off the ground. Because on a 2-inch bumper on a table or on a floor, when they go to pick it up, their nose hits like the concrete or the table. And they almost have to turn their heads like sideways to maybe grab it. So that's why the dumbbells and stuff are up off the ground, the barrel part of it, so it's easier for them to grab. But that's why I like to use a 3-inch bumper, because it's really easy for them to grab. They don't have to turn their head. They don't have to do any of those things. It's really easy for them to grab and pick up off the floor. That's why I do a 3-inch bumper, honestly. So, and then once we get this process all going and you finally got to the ground, now put the bumper 3 feet in front of them, grab their collar, pinch their ears, say fetch. Hopefully they reach for it. If they don't, say fetch and kind of pinch their ear and pull them to it and make them pick it up. And you want to keep doing this process until you can have that bumper 10 feet in front of you. You grab their collar and you say fetch, and they're almost kind of pulling you to the bumper to get to it. And you give them a little bit of resistance, and they're pulling you, and you're still holding on. And then when they grab it, let off on the pressure. Don't let go of their collar, but let off on the pressure, and lots of praise. That a boy, that a girl, good job, that's good. Yeah, a lot of praise at that point, because they're giving you a ton of effort to do it right. And if you're on the table, it's the exact same thing, but you're up on the table. On the table, you put it on one end of the table, and you make them run across it, and the other end, you go back and forth with that. So it's the same process, but you're on the table if you're doing that same thing. You follow me so far?
Yeah, one question. So you release the pressure when the bumper goes into their mouth, not when they're attempting to go towards the bumper.
At this point, correct. At this point, correct. When they actually get it in their mouth, because what a lot of times will happen was you'll think, oh, they got it, and so they reach for it, you let go of their ear, and they'll just quit. They'll be like, yeah, I faked you out, and then they won't pick it up. So then you got to grab them again. So you really want to solidify that at this point, right? So now you're on the table, bumpers, you can lay the bumper on the floor, you're going back and forth, they're moving nicely with you, they're doing a really good job, they're giving you effort, they may be pulling you a little bit with some resistance, they're really trying to get to the bumper. So now you're ready to move on to collar fetch at this point. So this is where it gets a little goofy, because I still have the flat collar on them. Then you've got to put I got an e-collar to put on them, right? And this is where you have to, I still hold the flat collar or the e-collar even a little bit underneath that, whichever one you want to use. And I have a bumper in my hand and a transmitter. It's kind of goofy, but usually my transmitter will be in my left hand, or it doesn't really matter, or right, however you want to do it. But then you have to be able to hold on to the bumper just a little bit somehow. And so when you do that, you'll basically start completely over. So they're already collar conditioned. So this is why I do collar conditioning first. Because if you didn't do collar conditioning first, you got to get through all this force fetch, and then you got to go back and collar condition, and then before you collar fetch.
Right.
See my point?
Yeah.
Now this is just a smooth transition into collar fetch. So now you put your collar on really low, like 1 or 2, whatever works, and it's the same process. You sit them down, you hold the bumper 6 inches in front of them, you say fetch, you still pinch the ear, you say fetch, and you give them a little bit of collar pressure at the same time, and they'll reach for the bumper. So you've already taught them the ear pinch. Now we're putting the collar with it.
And this is continuous on the collar until they have the bumper in their mouth, just like the ear.
No,
it's just a tap.
It's not. This is more of the like the nick,
right? Okay.
Continuous nick I was telling you about.
Right.
Or a multiple continuous nicks. You can use low constant pressure if you would like. It really is all up to you and how the dog functions the best. I use a lot of continuous nicks on this because if you hold the collar down, with the direct pressure or the continuous, they start worrying more about the actual collar pressure than performing the act.
Right. So just
and now you're fighting
tap.
them.
Okay.
You're fighting them. So because what we're going to try to do is we're going to say fetch, nick, fetch. We're going to go fetch, nick on the collar, say fetch. We're trying to teach the dog to beat the nick to perform the task quicker. So I like to use continuous nicks. So I'm going to pinch the ear, continuous nick, fetch. They'll reach for it. Eventually, you still have a hold of the collar, but now you no longer need the ear because you've transferred those pressure points and the pressure and how to turn off the pressure from the ear to the collar, the collars. Does that make sense?
Yes, and for those of you that are new to e-collars, and a continuous nick means as long as you hold the button, it's going to have pressure. And so you're just tapping it lightly, but you're in full control of how long.
Yes.
As long as you're pressing it, there's pressure versus other settings where it doesn't matter how long you press it, it just gives a little bit of a tap.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I don't use the momentary. I call it continuous nicks. That's my own little term.
Right.
It's on the continuous mode, but I just push the button myself.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by continuous nicks.
Yep.
But so now you've done that, and now you can let go of the ear. I still have a hold of the collar, and now we do the same process. Move farther away, get it to the ground, put it out in front of you, fetch, nick, fetch. And if they start really fighting the system and fighting the collar, it's not a problem at all to maybe slow down a little bit, go back to the ear pinch, and maybe they haven't tried you. Maybe you've gone a little bit too quick, and they're not in their head. They're not transferring that pressure from the collar to the ear, so to speak, or from the ear to the collar. So it's not a big deal to go back, but you want to try to get to where you're just using the collar at this point. So now we're moving forward with the collar. We're holding on to the collar. We're using the e-collar. And now you want to get to the point where you can put that. Now, I still have a long lead on everybody. I still got like a 6-foot lead on them. Now you want to be able to put that bumper out there on the ground 10, 15 feet away. Maybe get them to heel, start moving forward, and walk him right into it. Say heel, walk him right into it, and then say fetch, and then nick him with the collar and say fetch again. Hopefully they will reach down and grab that bumper when they're moving, right? So we've kind of taught them how to move forward by pulling their collar. We've taught them all that stuff. Now we want to get them just where you're just holding onto you'll be holding onto the collar at this point as well. Like bend down, grab the flat collar, and I like to hold on to it. So you have the transmitter in your right hand, you have the flat collar in your left hand. You say heel, you just kind of walk them forward, and then you say fetch. You nick them and say fetch again, and hopefully they almost pull out of your hand. And if they do, just let go of the collar. So you've almost tricked them into pushing, like you used to push them down with the collar. Now you let them pull out of your hand and let them do it on their own. You've almost tricked them, but you don't want to let go of the lead yet. The lead's in your right hand, transmitter's in your right hand, dog collar in your left. And when they pull out of it, they're going to pull out of your hand, reach down, grab the bumper, and now you still have the lead and everything right there. Then you just get them to sit. Do lots and lots of praise there. And what I like to do at that point is either you can do one or two things. You can have them either sit, or when they pick it up, let them get a good hold of it, and then have them move with you 3 or 4 more feet, and then have them sit down. Instead of just grabbing it and sitting down, and then their head comes up, they may fall out of their mouth. But you can get them to move forward and then sit them down right there. Lots of praise. Don't overdo it, but lots of praise, and that's what you want. Then you put the bumper back down again, and you kind of keep doing the same thing. Hold on to their collar, hold on the leash and transmitter, and keep doing that. You want to keep doing that till you're at the point where all you have is you have the transmitter in your right hand, the leash in your left hand, just about a foot or two above their collar, and you can walk them at heel, and you say fetch, and then they reach down and grab it. Fetch, nick, fetch. Fetch, nick, fetch. Now you got to be careful when you're starting to use the e-collar, and I should have said this a long time ago. Timing is of the utmost importance. What you don't want to do is say fetch, then they reach for the bumper and they get it in their mouth, and you mistime the nick when their mouth is around the bumper. So now they think that bumper hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So you really want your timing has to be fetch, nick, then they grab the bumper, and then you say fetch. You have to time all that. You don't want the e-collar pressure hitting them when they're grabbing the bumper. That is imperative that you don't miss your
So
timing.
way better early than late.
Way better early. Way better early for sure. So now you're hopefully you're to this point now where you can walk around. Now you're going to run into some refusals right here. This is where I like to go. I don't just keep hammering on the collar when you get a refusal. I like to simplify it, and what I'll do is I'll grab their collar, and I may even ear pinch them with maybe a small nick if they give me a refusal.
Mm-hmm.
I like to simplify. Hey, this is what I want. And then once they do that once or twice, then I get rid of the ear and I go right to the collar and they'll walk them around. I don't like to just keep hammering on the collar and hope they figure it out. I want to simplify at this point, move back a little bit, grab their collar, pinch their ear, and hey, this is what I want you to do when I say fetch. Now, just because you've done this for one or two days, and your dog is doing it really, really well, and I'm done with force fetch. You're not even close. The whole key of force fetch is, I said it earlier, just because the dog wants to pick it up, that's a big difference between having to pick it up. And the whole thing about force fetch is you have to get to failure first, basically failure, before you can move on. And what I mean by that is you want to get to that dog to the point where it's mentally, this is a fine line that people have to understand, and how to read a dog and how to add pressure and take it back. You want to get to the point where the dog is basically giving up almost, completely failing, totally resenting you, basically hates the process, and you say fetch, and you ear pinch them, and they just say, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. This is where, as a trainer, you need to push through, and you need to, for a lack of a better term, you need to impose your will on them. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is you have to get them to the point of failure. Then you don't give up at this point. You keep pushing away and add pressure, and you keep doing it until the dog accepts it and does it even when it doesn't want to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess what I'm curious about is how, if you're not having any failure and the dog's doing what you're asking, what would you do to try to
add pressure? So if
you're just adding more, you're just adding more pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure.
So if the dog is doing everything you want it to do, it's never really messed up. You pinch its ear, it grabs a bumper, and you think, I'm the greatest force fetcher to ever live. Mm-hmm. This is easy. You want to add a little bit of pressure, do what it takes to when that dog refuses you. They're like, nope, not doing it. That's too much pressure. That's when you got to get to the point where you push that dog through that failure point to perform the task that you want.
Because a compliant dog is still wanting to do it.
Yes.
And so you need to get to the point where they're like, I don't want to do this.
Correct.
And that's when it's like, no, you will do this.
I don't want to do this. You're not going to make me do this. I'm calling mom. I'm unfriending you on Facebook. I've had it. And that's where you push that. That's where you bow your neck, you grit your teeth. And this is where, hey, now it may take 2 or 3 days to do this. It may take 10 minutes. But you have to get to that point of failure before you can push and you've got to push your dog through it. This is the tool that when the rubber meets the road, when they're a little bit older and they don't want to go on force to pile. They don't want to get in the water on water force. They don't, you give them a collar pressure and they want to shut down on you. This is where you're teaching that dog under no circumstance do you quit. This part of the force fetch is not so much about force fetching, about picking it up when I tell you to. It's about pushing through the pressure and the mental stress to perform that, give you effort, right? Give you effort and perform the task that you're asking without quitting and giving up and coming back to you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
This is a humongous step in force fetch. Huge. I can't stress this enough. Now, I'm not saying overdo this pressure. I'm not saying be mean. I'm not saying, but you need to amp the pressure up to the point the dog fails. Then teach that dog how to push through its own failure to do the task that you're asking. So, that is a major, major deal, because I can't tell you how many dogs I've seen come in that were amateur force fetched and or pro force fetched. We'll put a bumper on the ground and say fetch, and they won't do it. They're like, nope, I'm not doing it.
Right.
They weren't really force fetched. They were like, hey, they picked it up because they wanted to pick it up, and it was never properly or thoroughly done. Or we think they're force fetched, and we move them into, from somebody else, and we move them into force to pile, and they start no-going me and the whole deal, and you can't even you can't do anything to them because they don't properly understand force fetch. So now we're backing all the way up, redoing force fetch. It's a headache. Once you have done this and done it properly, you'll never have to go back. Okay.
Right. So as you go farther on, and as the things get more advanced, and you start really trying to use pressure on them to get them to do what you want, if you don't go through this phase, then they're going to have more of a tendency to break down.
Correct. You've not. It's kind of like that Navy SEAL deal. They have Hell Week. They're not going to die, but they think they're going to die, and then they come out stronger and more mentally prepared and mentally tough. This is kind of like the dog's Navy SEAL training, so to speak. They hate it. They don't want to do it. They're shutting down the whole 9 yards, and you have to teach them to get through this thing. Okay, and so now that you've hit resentment stage now, and now you've fought through resentment stage, and the resentment stage can come anywhere. It can come now. It can come when you're ear pinching. It could come towards the end of collar fetch. At some point, hopefully, actually, I actually hope some point it shows up, because then you can work them through it. And if you haven't had it yet, maybe you're being a little bit too lenient, and you're not making it kind of hard enough for them, and make it a little bit harder, and get it to rear its ugly head. Some dogs have a really, really, really bad resentment stage, like really bad. Some dogs, they're like, oh, no, okay, we're good, and that's all it takes. It all depends on the dog, Yeah. All depends on the dog.
I think Georgie's was that first stage, but I can say that I guess I didn't really realize this last part, and I never brought her to that point in this phase of refusing to do it. Once we got past that first part, she was eager to do everything. So yeah. I would have been in the camp of, this is going so great.
Yeah, exactly. And then until it's not, and then you're in big trouble.
Right. And lucky for me, she's a natural pleaser that can handle loads of pressure.
Yeah, and the dogs that like to please, and the intelligent dogs usually that like to please, their resentment stage, honestly, is not nearly as bad as some of the really stubborn, don't care to please, kind of hold a grudge, so to speak. Sometimes those dogs' resentment stages are really bad, and sometimes the dogs that aren't real smart or very intelligent, you have to understand, and as a trainer through this whole process, you have to understand what is resentment and lack of effort, and what is confusion.
Right.
So if they're confused, slow down, back up, simplify. If they're in resentment stage and they're just not trying, that's where you have to bow your neck and kind of impose your will on them, so to speak.
And body language should show the difference between confusion and resentment, right?
Yes. You would think so. But just because, say you hit resentment stage and the next day is perfect. Like, don't think that, hey, I'm good, I'm done, this is perfect. Try to proof it again. And what I mean by that is try to amp the pressure up and mental stress up a little bit more and see if you can find the resentment stage again. And if you can push your dog through it real quick, that means you've got it through and you're done. If you hit that resentment stage again and there's a big time fight again, then you need to keep going. And
they're basically just quitting. They're just like, no, laying down, avoidance,
whatever.
Right.
Laying down, quit refusing to pick everything up, maybe trying to bolt. Hopefully, they're not trying to bolt to a kennel. They're just doing anything in their power to get away from you and the work. That's where you have to make them do it.
Right.
And then throughout this process, you have to proof it. So amp the pressure up. And if they don't, if they don't resent you, they don't quit. That means you're doing a really good job.
Right.
And in this collar fetch, so now in this collar fetch, we're walking around at heel. We're fetch, and they're picking up the bumper really crisp. They're doing a good job. They're picking it all up. Now what I like to do here is I like to almost kind of proof my force fetch a little bit. And some of the dogs that you have in the kennel, you can do this a lot with. Some of them you can't so much. It all depends on the mental toughness of the dog. And, and I'm not saying to get your dog to the resentment stage where it's completely shut down and it's quitting. Some dogs' resentment stage is a lot lighter than others. You have to find that, and you have to know your dog and know your animal on how to do all this. But the dogs that are going to be hunt test dogs that we get in here that are pretty ramming, they got a lot of go, a lot of try, a lot of effort. You can see those dogs. And those dogs, even the gun dogs, some of them dogs, you can tell as a trainer, those dogs you can push. Like, hey, they've got real high drive. They got their prey drives real high. They love to retrieve. They love to work. And those dogs like that, you can add a little bit more pressure to them, and you can push them a little bit harder and go a little bit farther with them. Some of the softer dogs that you get in, you got to be careful because they're not the same dog as that big hard charging dog. So you have to know when to back out a little bit. Go back down in the pressure, come back up, kind of like we did in collar conditioning. Same thing with force fetch. You got to know what makes them dogs tick. You just can't say, hey, Chris said to do this. I did not say to do that. You have to read your dog. If it's a softer dog, you go a little bit easier. If it's a harder dog that you can push, maybe you push a little bit harder. But you have to reach that each individual dog's threshold when it comes to this stuff. And can
you ruin a dog during force fetch by being too hard on them?
Absolutely. You absolutely can. That's why I said earlier, if you're nervous about this and you don't want to do it, find you a really good professional and let them do it. Because you can screw this up. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Timing, maybe your timing's terrible and you were nicking and giving pressure with the e-collar when they had the bumper in their mouth. Like, you can do all kinds of things wrong at this point. So now what I like to do on some of these dogs, they're walking in heel, they're picking it up really nice. What I'll do is I'll put a bumper out there about 10 feet. And let's just say that, for instance, we're on a 1. And a 1 gets a pretty good reaction from the dog, right? So I'll say fetch. And I won't walk forward or nothing. I'll say fetch and have that dog run to the bumper. So don't let go of the lead or anything like that. But you say fetch. Hopefully that dog runs across the floor or moves pretty quick across the floor, picks up the bumper, comes back into heel and sits down. That's why your obedience has got to be good. Your hold's got to be good. Everything's got to be good because you can't work on all this stuff, obedience and all that stuff while you're doing this. So hopefully that's all good. Then what I like to do on these dogs, let's just say 1 gun. So now I want to use a little bit of a continuous pressure here. I want to proof our training at this point. I'll put the bumper out there and I'll say fetch and I'll hold it all on like a high 1. I use continuous and I'll put a little bit of resistance on the lead and hopefully he tries to pull through the resistance of my holding on the lead as I'm giving continuous pressure, like trying to pull me to the bumper because it knows the quicker it gets a bumper in its mouth, the faster the pressure is off. So now you have resistance from the lead and you have the collar on continuous. Then once it gets to the bumper and it goes to grab it, you let off on the pressure and let off on the lead a little bit. He'll pick up the bumper and come right back into heel. And you can do this if you have a real hard charging dog. You can you can proof this with pretty high pressure on the collar, but don't stay up to go up and down, up and down. But that's a really good way to proof if you've actually truly collar conditioned and force fetch your dog properly, that where it knows how to shut the pressure off and move and push through the pressure and almost pull you to the bumper. That means you're winning. That means you're doing a really good job.
How long do you resist? Like 2 second count? Or?
I've done some dogs. I've done it, and here's what you want to do. And at this point, if you see your dog quit and give up, maybe you're too high on the pressure, but if you see your dog quit and give up, then back off on the pressure, say fetch without collar pressure. Let him pull your rope a little bit, and do it, attaboy. And then next time, add the pressure again. Teach that dog that, hey, just because you're getting collar pressure and resistance, that doesn't mean I want you to stop. That means I want you to keep going.
Right.
Because if you can do this to a dog, like I'm explaining, it's hard to explain on the air here. It's really impressive if you would see it in person. It's very, very impressive. And if you get to this point with your dog, you're literally almost forcing the dog to the pile at the end of force fetch with resistance.
Right.
So when you get to the point of force to pile, you're damn near done. And you don't even know it yet. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, because we had talked about this on the Duck Hunt podcast, so I did go through that. I didn't have the balls to really do it to the level I probably should have, but I probably gave a 2 second count on like a 5, and she did it great. So I was happy with that for sure.
I like to turn the pressure down a little bit, and I like to just let them pull me to the bumper like real light, and you can kind of see their toenails digging in, and they're really giving you a ton of effort to get there. And I don't do this forever. I just do it maybe for a day or two, and once that's over, man, then you're if you can do that, your force fetch is really solid. It understands pressure. It knows how to shut it off. It accepts it. It's stable. It's not trying to bolt. It's not trying to get out of doing the work. Once you do that and your dog is doing that, you've done a really good job with force fetch. It's a really nice tool to have.
Right.
And then what I'll do too at the end there, I'll just maybe I might force on a bird a little bit too, like a little frozen pigeon, that sort of thing. And it looks like a bumper. And you'll put it down, say fetch, have them pick it up. I don't do it with big ducks so much because they have to really work at grabbing those. But and then once you can do that, then I do a little walking fetch where I put 4 bumpers out. I walk at heel, fetch, nick fetch. They pick up one, sit down. I'm sure everybody's probably seen it. Take the bumper out, put it behind them. Then I fetch the next one. I just keep doing that with walking fetch. And then I will skip one. I'll do every other one, and once you do that, your force fetch, if you've proofed your force fetch and you can do that, your force fetch is probably pretty good, pretty solid. And you know what? It might have taken you 2 or 3 weeks. It might have taken you 6 weeks. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It has to be done if you're going to use a force program. It has to be done.
So don't get frustrated. Don't rush. Just take your time and
take your time. And one thing I get, sometimes we usually, and everybody's going to ask me, do you keep throwing marks through this process? And we pretty much stop our marking. We want our dogs chasing birds and marking and doing all those things before force fetch. One thing I don't like to force fetch, I have force fetch dogs that don't like birds and don't like to retrieve. I've done it. I've made them retrieve. I don't like to do it. And I've quit doing that. If we get a dog into training that just doesn't like birds, doesn't like to retrieve, has no prey drive, has no desire to do it, I won't even force fetch. I'll send those dogs home. I've done that in the past where I won't make them retrieve like that anymore. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to the dog, the clients, and us. It's a really hard thing to do, and so I quit doing that. But during this process of force fetch, we quit throwing marks for the dogs. We may throw a little fun bumper from here and there, but in my mind too, then you go back to you throw a bumper, now it wants to drop it. Now you're working on hold, and now you're working on force. You're working on too many things at one time. So make sure the dog likes to retrieve, likes birds, and then, obedience, collar conditioning, throw them some marks, get them going. But once you're into force fetch and doing your thing, I quit throwing marks, and we just work on force fetch. And as soon as force fetch is over, we get back into marks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about as easily as I can explain force fetch on the air without actually doing it and really having somebody see it. But the biggest thing I can just tell you, the biggest thing about force fetch is don't just quit. Don't give up. Don't get frustrated. Don't lose your temper. It's just a dog, and yeah, you want to be their friend, and yeah, you want to do all these things. But if you really want your dog to excel, not eat birds, not mouth birds, get through a good force program, this has to be done. I know there's some people that are anti-force fetch, but that will only get you so far, because not only are we talking about delivering a bird to heel nicely, we're also talking about having a tool in your toolbox when you start working on your force program that you've taught the dog how to mentally and physically withstand some pressure and do the task. When the chips are down, they don't quit, they don't give up, they just keep pushing forward. And that's really what we're looking for here.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard, and maybe people talk about it, I just haven't heard it, but the whole aspect of building the dog mentally down the road for what's coming up down the road, I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, and when everybody see it, you got that dog that's trying to run the downshore water blind, and you give them some collar pressure, and it doesn't understand it, and it just gives up and comes in. Or it's, a lot of amateurs are out there, they're scared to use the e-collar because they don't want their dog to quit and give up and come in. Well, that's because those people have not taught their dog how to deal with it mentally, right? And it's just like a little kid. A little kid falls down, scrapes her knee, and every time it's okay, little guy, you pick them up all nervous about them. So every time for the rest of their life, they poke their damn finger with a needle or a sticker, they're crying like a little girl. But it's the same thing with a dog. If teach them how to be a little bit mentally or tougher, and you're going to have a nicer dog. And some dogs, Elliot, are super mentally tough, and they're really fun to work with, and it's pretty easy for them, and you can lay on them a little bit, and you think you're the greatest trainer in the world, and you got this big high roller dog that you can just add all kinds of pressure to, and it does great things, and you think you're the greatest. It's the ones that make you think and slow down, the softer ones, the more delicate ones, the ones that make you think outside the box on how to add pressure, and teach them softer dogs how to deal with pressure on their own schedule, not your schedule, not the hot rod, but their own schedule. I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, my British dog it's just too soft for the e-collar." Well, that's BS, because I've trained a pile of British dogs. I have the best one to ever walk the face of the earth sitting right here, Shaker. I've trained a bunch of them, and any dog can be force fetched. Any dog can be collar conditioned. It's how good are you at it, and do you have the patience to go at their pace and not cram a square peg in a round hole? So that's the biggest thing.
Reading your dog, I think, is...
You have to. And that's a lot of this force fetching and collar conditions all about reading and timing. So...
And really, I'm seeing more and more, all of training is about watching and reading your dog. I always wanted it to be black and white, but it's learning your dog, reading your dog. Dog A, you may do one thing. Dog B, you may do something completely different.
Dog training. Dog trainers live in the gray area. There's nothing black and white. They have to read between the lines, and it's all about the gray area. So,
and I will say, I know you don't put out very many litters, but for people that are listening, one thing that I think is cool about your litters, I was telling someone about this the other day, is you're not really a breeder. So when you breed, you're being very, very careful about dispositions, about which dog's going to match perfect with the dog. So, guys, if Chris has a litter coming up, you want to jump on those dogs. Yeah. Because you are so careful about your breeding.
Yeah, we're not breeders, and we're dog trainers. But I will tell you, we only do 1 or 2, maybe 3 litters a year at the absolute most. And we're not breeding those dogs to, make puppy money like a lot of breeders out there are. But we breed our best dogs to our best dogs because those are the dogs that we want to train. Right. I'm not just breeding a dog to make some money to sell a puppy. I want to train those dogs. I want to get them back into training And I'll tell you, a lot of our litters, and I'm not bragging or nothing, it's just fact. A lot of the puppies that we have in our kennel, some of the best ones we got, are out of this house right here. Yeah. And it's because I try to match the male and the female, because those are the dogs that I want to train.
Yeah.
And we have a real high success with those dogs. They're some of the best ones in the entire kennel.
So you have 3 right now, and I keep seeing you guys post about it. I'm just thinking, oh my Lord, why are these dogs not just getting taken immediately?
We have puppies on the ground right now from a 4-time Grand Hunter Retriever champion, MNH 4 Hall of Fame dog out of HRCH Master Hunter MNR, who is Georgie's full litter mate sister, Linda, and that's a spectacular litter. And we have a few of them that still need their forever homes. And it's crazy to me, because you see all the breedings out there, and I'm thinking, how are these puppies still? It's amazing to me. But
right. I don't think people get it. And correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of people that do breedings, and they get titles on them. And once they get the titles on them, they're just breeding. It's not a thoughtful, this dog will work well with this dog because of these attributes. It's not that. It's still kind of a puppy mill mentality a little bit. Yeah. And I'm sure that a lot of those can be good dogs, but it's not the same as when you put out a litter.
So let's just say we have a male and a female, and let's just say the female is really intelligent, likes to do the work, but isn't, super flashy, but loves to do it, super intelligent, good marker, good blind runner, and then let's say we have a male that's maybe not quite as smart, but has way more go and desire. So we like to put those two together, because let's just say the sire's weakness, so to speak, is lack of brain power.
Right.
Which we don't have any dogs that have lack of brain, but let's just say that's kind of their weakness. And let's just say the female's weakness is brain power. Let's put those two together.
You mean her strength is her strength?
You offset strengths and weaknesses and see what works the best. And it doesn't always work. But I'll tell you, a lot of our breeding we're really, really proud of, and they've produced some super nice dogs. Georgie's out of one of our litters, and we like to tinker with those, and those are the dogs that we want to train right now. But we do have some stuff coming up. There's some nice litters on the ground. I got a super nice litter on the ground, like super, super nice litter on the ground that nobody even knows about yet. But that will be coming out here one of these days. I'll let everybody know. But we do have a couple puppies here available. I was just mentioning that's a great litter. We need to get to their forever homes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So by the time this comes out, maybe those will be gone. But if not, maybe. check the Flatliner Kennels Facebook page and see, because it's going to be some spectacular dogs for sure.
And if everybody listens to this, let's get some questions on the Facebook page. Our next podcast, I'm planning our next podcast to be on. Our next step of the FlowChart, teaching your dog to handle, would be like 3-handed casting and then force to pile. And I think it's time to answer a few questions in our next podcast towards the end of it. I think.
That sounds good. So again, I will put those up. I'll put a call out on the Facebook page. So get over there, join it, and ask the questions, and you'll see that post, and we will answer them. And don't forget, we are releasing every Monday morning a new video. I don't know if you saw what I released today, but it was it's called Casting in the Wind, where that golden was having problems with the blind work and not doing what its handler was asking. It was I thought it was fantastically fascinating.
Yeah,
and so far that's been the feedback.
That was Brett and Colt in our seminar, and they're a super nice team together. Colt's a fabulous young golden. He's a nice dog, and they're struggling a little bit with their control, and Colt kind of wants to do his own thing, and Brett's trying to kind of deal with that, and I think we worked through those cast refusals really well. And I did watch that video, and it really showed. He ran that blind, and we threw that mark, we poison bird that mark, and it really showed that he just wanted to run over to the mark.
Right.
And he didn't want to cast into the wind away from that mark. And it wasn't anything Brett was doing wrong. It was the dog was just hit. He's like, I'm not doing it. And Brett really did a good job of working through that and working with that dog, because you'll see that dog, didn't want to take a left cast, but it would take a right one, because the right one was where he wanted to go. And he did a good job of working through that. I was really proud of him.
Yeah, I really liked that video. So, guys, check that out. Go to subscribe to the Flatlander Kennels YouTube channel. And also, my personal channel is Freelance Duck Hunting, where I have put out day 1 and day 2 at the Boomtown HRC hunt test. And then Thursday, I'm releasing Georgie's run at the Tidal in South Dakota. So you can go check those out on the Freelance Duck Hunting page. We got our hands on Chris's drone, and actually Elijah he loved that drone so much, Chris, he went and purchased his own. Yeah, he couldn't stand not having one around.
That's awesome.
So,
I shouldn't have bought one then. He just bought one.
Well, I'm guessing you're going to figure out how to use it and
Come
scout
duck season,
some for
I will
yourself.
for sure.
Right. Cool. Was there anything else?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, let's shut this down then.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you, Elliot. Thanks, everybody. We'll see everybody at the line. Thanks for listening. Take that aim.
Gotta strike this chord with the humble hearts. Bearing heavy chains and blue collar scars.